Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, demand for doses, signs of progress, along with some setbacks in the fight against COVID. Millions of Americans now getting the shot, but for many, it's too late as cases of both the Omicron and Delta variants go up. We have team coverage, including an exclusive look at one hospital that's 200% over capacity. Legal challenge, the Justice Department suing the state of Texas, alleging its new GOP-drawn voting maps discriminate against minority voters.
The redistricting plans approved by the Texas state legislature and signed into law by the governor will deny Black and Latino voters an equal opportunity to participate in the voting process.
The major impact a ruling could have ahead of the 2022 midterm elections. Plus, pandemic-fueled FOMO, a new study on the effects of social distancing on young people, why the fear of missing out is pushing teens toward a more digital lifestyle and how it's impacting their real-life relationships. And a story of remarkable resilience. A dance troupe devastated by an unimaginable loss returns to their passion, the reason members of the Milwaukee dancing Grannies said they had to keep on dancing. Of course, that was that group impacted in that Christmas parade tragedy, and that's at least one little piece of hope that we sing out of that.
Good to see that resilience.
Absolutely. It's a great story. You'll want to stick around before we begin, though, with the country's fight to control two spreading coronavirus variants.
Well, scientists try to figure out Omicron. The U.S. is seeing a rise in cases of the Delta variant. Nationwide, 99% of new cases are tied to Delta, with around 100,000 people now testing positive every day. Still, the list of states reporting cases of the Omicron variant is growing. The most recent state, Texas, was someone testing positive for the strain in the Houston area. Bottom line, no matter the strain, it's clear COVID is still spreading. That's leading to a rise in vaccinations and booster shots. Just this past week, more than 2 million Americans got a vaccine dose in one day, the highest in a single day since May. MSNBC anchor Lindsay Reiser joins us now from a pharmacy in Trenton, New Jersey, that is seeing a rise in vaccine demand. So, Lindsay, how are vaccinations going where you are right now? And do we know what is behind the new demand?
Good morning to you both. Yeah, so nationwide we're seeing this uptick, and locally we're also seeing it. Right now we're in Trenton, New Jersey. That's in Mercer County. And we're going to put up a graphic showing right now what the demand is like. So right now in Mercer County, about 78.4% of people have gotten at least one dose. That's a pretty big jump from the beginning of November, when that number was about 72.8. These are numbers of how everybody stacks up compared to one another. But what is driving this demand, you ask? I mean, part of it is concern over the Omicron variant. One clinic that I talked to here in Trenton, New Jersey, they say anecdotally in the last week they've heard a lot of people talking about that. Also, employee mandates. Many believe maybe a decrease in vaccine hesitancy, the fact that booster expansion just happened as well. So let's hear from the chief medical officer from one of those clinics in Trenton, New Jersey, about the demand. By the way, recently they had an hour wait at one of their clinics. So the demand is definitely there. Let's listen to what she said.
We've been seeing a big mix, a significant increase in boosters, but also still some people coming in for first doses, children, both age 12 to 18 and also 5 to 11. That has significantly increased in the sense that about a month and a half ago, we were seeing maybe 15 to 20 vaccines in the 3 hours that we'd be at a standing location.
And this is also happening, Joe, as we just got the first confirmed Omicron case in New Jersey. It was a woman who was visiting the state. She's from Georgia, fully vaccinated. And so definitely when I'm talking to these people who are on the ground, they are telling us they are hearing people talk about Omicron, and that is driving some of this demand. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay, it's not just first and second doses. It is also boosters. Are more people getting their booster shots because they're worried about the winter months and about Omicron?
So I talked to the American Pharmacists Association, and they say that right now it does appear that boosters are driving a lot of this demand nationwide. Those are the numbers that we're seeing. There are more people who are getting those boosters than first-time shots. And then that chief medical officer at the local clinic says about 2/3 of their shots right now are boosters. And so we know that people are hearing the news. They're hearing that immunity is waning. Let's listen to what the American Pharmacists Association told me as well yesterday.
I think with the new recommendation from CDC, which says that everybody greater than 18 years and above need to get their booster shot, I think that's driven people to get the vaccine, driven by the new variant and the reports that are there and the uncertainty right now of that variant and how the vaccine will work, what will be the severity of the disease.
And so this pharmacy, this private pharmacy that I'm in front of right now, they open at 9 o'clock, but we're told, Joe, that they are going to start opening on Sundays from 10 to 6. They normally were closed, but they need to accommodate the demand. Joe?
And Lindsay, how does New Jersey compare with what we're seeing nationwide when it comes to vaccination rates?
Yeah, Joe, we showed you a graphic at the top. We're going to pull that up again so we can kind of break everything down. So in the U.S. right now, 71.1% of people of all ages have gotten at least one dose. When you go to New Jersey, that number does increase. And then here in Mercer County, the number is higher than the national average, a little lower than the state average. But right now, health officials are telling me that they are feeling like this is good news, that more people are getting out there. They're working on beefing up staffing. They're working on streamlining their systems. They're working on making systems appointment-based so they can really get a feel for what the volume is going to be like. But they say overall, with cases up, it is a good thing that more people are getting interested. Joe?
Lindsay Reiser in New Jersey. Thank you, Lindsay.
Now, concerns over the new variant and a rise in cases this winter are driving public health officials to put in place tougher vaccine mandates. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer shows us what one major city is doing as more healthcare systems are feeling the pressure.
With Omicron now discovered in nearly 20 states, the mayor of New York City is implementing the nation's most sweeping vaccine mandate for all private employers. By the end of this month, those who work in person must have at least one dose of a vaccine unless they qualify for an exemption.
We needed to do something bold quickly and get ahead of all of this.
With new testing restrictions also implemented for all travelers entering the U.S., our nation is bracing for Omicron, but already facing a disaster set into motion by Delta.
I used to wake up crying because I thought I was going to die.
Like 99% of those infected with the virus, Vera Martinez-Ruiz, who isn't vaccinated, likely has Delta.
I never thought it would get me, and it got me. And it's really scary.
Martinez-Ruiz is lucky to be alive and just as fortunate to have a hospital bed. At the San Juan Regional Medical Center in Farmington, New Mexico, the ICU is over 200% capacity. More than half the patients in the building have COVID.
This is our fifth wave, and this is clearly the most severe wave that we've had to endure.
In need of a lifeline, this rural hospital is now getting help. An HHS National Disaster Medical Team has been deployed to assist overwhelmed staff. Typically used on the front lines of natural disasters, they're now needed for a growing crisis inside hospitals.
For some Americans, the pandemic is becoming an afterthought. But that's not the reality on the ground.
COVID is still very much here. These are very bad, very sad situations that oftentimes don't have a very good ending.
That is most true here in the ICU, where cameras have never been allowed before.
All of these rooms are full.
All of these rooms are full of intubated COVID patients.
Authorities want the public to see how dire the situation is.
A lot of the sickest patients that are on this floor won't make it out of this floor.
The grim reality of Delta is often overlooked, and for the sickest, the writing is on the wall. Scribbled on far too many doors here reads the words anointed by Father Tim. Patients who've been given their last rites because the end may be near.
Scientists say it'll probably be a few more days until we know how dangerous the Omicron variant is, but Dr. Fauci believes early indications point to a more contagious variant, but not necessarily one that's more severe. That would be good news for those HHS teams that have up to 10 units deployed every month. Savannah and Joe, back to you guys.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you so much.
Dr. Emmett Till joins us now. He's a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Doctor, good to have you with us. So let's talk about the new vaccine mandate for all private sector workers in New York City. Tell us more about what you make of it. Is this the kind of thing that's needed to get back to a somewhat normal in-person workplace again?
Many companies have really no tolerance for any kind of COVID risk, and the best way to do that is to have their workplace completely vaccinated. but many are reticent to do that on their own, so they sometimes fall back on government to do it for them. I think in a place like New York City, where the vaccination rate is very high, this is going to have some impact. But what we need is people in parts of the country that vaccination rates are very low. So think about West Virginia, for example, where 41% of people are fully vaccinated. That's where we need vaccine numbers to go, because that's where those hospitals are in crisis. I think New York City is going to do well no matter what, because they've got so much vaccination demand, even without this mandate. But we'll see what happens, because the OSHA mandate is caught up in courts, and there are a lot of people dug in. I don't know if this is going to get a court challenge. I also want to know what the new mayor is going to do when he takes office.
Doctor, let's talk about what we do and don't really know so far about the Omicron variant. So it's obviously spreading across the country. It's now in at least 19 states. But when we look worldwide, like let's look to South Africa, where this was first identified, first reported by doctors and scientists there, seeing one of the biggest impacts from the variant right now. Researchers there actually say people are getting this variant, and then they're much less sick than previous cases. That being said, the variant appears to be spreading faster. What do you think this means for the variant's impact on the global fight against the virus? How much of a setback do you think this will be if it might spread faster but with less severe symptoms?
I don't think it's a setback. I think we always expected that there were going to be new variants, and we know that COVID-19 was going to morph into a seasonal coronavirus eventually. Maybe this is the first step down that road where it's able to get around some of our immunity and spread efficiently but cause less severe disease. Everybody's waiting to see if these reports from South Africa will be borne out and if they can be extrapolated to other countries. But you have to remember that COVID is not going anywhere. We're going to have COVID cases 20 years from now, but it's going to be a much milder, much more manageable infection. And maybe that's where this is going. But the key thing is to get more people vaccinated, because even if this gets around some amount of our vaccine protection, vaccines are not all or nothing. The vaccines are likely to protect you against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And that's really what matters.
Clearly, the issue right now is the Delta variant still makes up the vast majority of cases. So do you think we are seeing the start of another surge here?
I think that what we're seeing is people moving indoors. It's getting colder, people having pandemic fatigue, dropping some of their mitigations, and we're seeing cases go up. I think that was anticipated, and this is what coronaviruses do. They have seasonality to them, and this one does as well. And I think that's likely what we'll see every winter season, that we'll see some uptick. The goal is to make sure that those are not translating into hospitalizations and hospitals in crisis, and they are in certain parts of the country because there's not enough vaccination. I'm going to the hospital after this interview, and it's mostly unvaccinated individuals that are in those hospitals taking up hospital beds. This is a self-inflicted issue that we have because people are shunning this technology, the vaccine.
All right, Dr. Amos Shidalja, thank you for joining us, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Doctor. To the White House now, where President Biden will hold high-stakes talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin today. Ukraine is expected to top the agenda in this morning's virtual meeting as tensions with neighboring Russia continue to escalate. Russia has been massing troops along the border with Ukraine. President Biden spoke with European leaders ahead of today's call, and the White House says it's ready to impose major economic sanctions on Russia if it invades Ukraine. NBC News White House correspondent Mike.
We've consulted significantly with our allies and believe we have a path forward that would impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy. You can call that a threat. You can call that a fact. You can call that preparation, whatever you want to call it. But that is something we've talked about publicly, and certainly the president would convey that as well.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now for more on this. Mike, good morning. So what's President Biden's message to President Putin going to be on Ukraine? And also, are there any signs the U.S. could take any action beyond those economic sanctions I just mentioned?
Yeah, Savannah, that really is the number one question heading into this virtual meeting today between the U.S. and Russian presidents, the most significant, perhaps, conversation on foreign policy in the Biden presidency so far. The White House ruling out yesterday, or at least declining to address specifically the question of whether the United States is prepared to respond militarily to either deter a Russian invasion of Ukraine or to respond to one. Instead, they're trying to focus on the severe economic sanctions that the U.S. and our European allies are prepared to impose at this stage. And we saw the White House yesterday, the president specifically phoning some of our closest allies in Europe, the leaders of Italy, Germany, the UK, and France. The leaders, according to a statement from the White House afterwards, agreed on the importance of maintaining Ukraine's sovereignty. They also, we also saw Secretary of State Tony Blinken speaking with the Ukraine president yesterday. Here is the State Department spokesperson laying out how the U.S. is approaching this meeting.
If Moscow shows no interest in investing in a diplomatic off-ramp,
that the United States and our partners, and we heard this loud and clear from our NATO allies in Riga last week, that we would be prepared to implement measures that we have not implemented in the past. Specifically, should Russia follow this path of confrontation and military action, we have made clear to Moscow that we will respond resolutely.
The president will be conducting this meeting from the Situation Room today, and White House officials say that in the days following this meeting, he will speak himself directly with Ukraine's president as well.
And now, Mike, Moscow has denied it's planning to invade Ukraine. So talk to us about President Putin's side of this today. What's he looking for here? What do you think we'll hear from him?
Well, we have to remember that President Putin is a former KGB officer, right? He has a view of Russia's borders that include territory in the Ukraine that led to, of course, the annexation of Crimea in 2014. But the very narrow, specific diplomatic question that we expect to be the focus for President Putin today, something he's going to be seeking a commitment from President Biden about, is NATO's whether Ukraine could potentially join NATO as a member of that alliance. We saw something of a scramble, you'll remember, when President Biden was attending the NATO summit in Brussels this summer, because Ukraine's president stated that the NATO alliance agreed to allow Ukraine to become a member. What the White House said afterwards and what the NATO officials said themselves was that they simply were underscoring a commitment that they made in 2008, laying out the conditions for Ukraine to potentially join NATO, but that there has not been progress enough at this stage for Ukraine to become a member.
And Mike, what else are both leaders expected to discuss today?
Obviously, the U.S.-Russia relationship is a complicated one, but one in which there's also potential alignment. And what the White House officials say, there is going to be a focus on issues like cybersecurity, a point of tension between those countries, but also energy prices. Obviously, Russia, a significant producer of energy. We're also going to see another diplomatic flare-up, U.S. seeking alignment with Russia as they try to resurrect those Iranian nuclear talks as well. Russia, a key partner in that P5+1 group that made that agreement under the Obama administration.
Mike Memoli for us from the White House. Thanks so much, as always, Mike.
Thanks.
The Justice Department is suing Texas over the Lone Star State's plans to redraw congressional districts within the state. Attorney General Merrick Garland made the announcement at a news conference yesterday, saying the state's plans unfairly discriminate against minority voters who have fueled the population boom in Texas. In response, the Texas Attorney General tweeted, "I'm confident that our legislators' redistricting decisions will be proven lawful, and this preposterous attempt to sway democracy will fail." MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Cynthia Oxney joins us now. Cynthia, good morning to you. First of all, walk us through the DOJ's case here. What are they arguing?
Okay, well, this is, let me just frame it. This is clearly Garland's passion. He's had voting rights cases in several states, Georgia, Louisiana, Arizona he's been involved in, and now this is his second voting rights case in Texas. And generally, the argument is Texas has grown by 2 million people, most of them Hispanic, and yet there are no districts where Hispanics actually might gain a seat in Congress. So 40% of the population in Texas is white, but they control 60% of the districts. And what he's saying is the manner in which the districts were drawn was purposefully drawn to minimize Latino voting strength, divide it, and allow the Republicans and particularly the whites to control the future elections.
Now, Cynthia, as I mentioned, the Texas Attorney General says he's confident his state will prevail. What's the argument being made by Texas Republicans to keep these redrawn congressional maps in place?
The argument by the Texans Republicans is, hey, we're just trying to get more Republican seats. And that's really the nub, isn't it? We're trying to get more Republican seats or we're trying to get more white seats. And what were they really drawing for? Since the Supreme Court opinion in about 2013, the Justice Department has the burden of proving that the districts were drawn for a discriminatory reason. It's a high bar, and it may be difficult to reach that bar. But that is what the Attorney General thinks he can do.
So, Cynthia, could a ruling on this case be decided ahead of the midterm elections next year? If so, what kind of impact would that have on the political landscape, not just in Texas, but really other states that have been redrawing their maps?
Right. Well, the maps are drawn. They've been accepted by the legislator in Texas and signed by the governor. Most likely, these are the maps that will go forward in the midterms. That is a reality. Redistricting cases and voting rights cases take a very long time. The maps could be changed at some point, but the most likely outcome is these are the maps that will be used in the midterms.
Yeah, the midterms are coming quick, primaries even quicker in many of these states. Cynthia Oxney, thanks so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
And let's now get a check on your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns is with us. Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. So quite a storm rolled through the Ohio Valley and East Coast last night with high winds. If anyone was watching that football game, it was pretty windy and snowy, too. And the worst of it, though, was in areas of Tennessee and Kentucky. This was a confirmed tornado damage in central Kentucky. They have 95-mile-per-hour winds. 4 mobile homes got pushed off their foundations. One man was in the mobile home you're seeing right there and was in it when it started flipping at night. Thankfully, he did not get too injured and is okay, but a lot of cleanup there. And also, how about this scene in Tennessee? A school bus, a driver was in it, no students, thankfully, flipped over when an RV hit it. An RV was blowing in the wind. It was not a tornado. They say it was actually just the winds as the cold front went through, but thank goodness no students were in that bus. So let's get to the weather now that the cold front has passed through. Winter has returned in a big way to many areas. We're not seeing a lot of snow out there this morning, just a little bit near the Great Lakes. As far as the temperatures, though, they have plunged. It's not like yesterday's incredible warmth, and it's actually brutally cold in a few spots. Notice the Green Bay temperature of 0. Minneapolis is at 9. Bismarck is at 7. So it's finally winter in the northern plains. But the wind chills are pretty cold. Even Nashville's at 22. Asheville's at 22. So the chilly air is with us. So it's going to be a cold winter day. There's not a lot of rain or snow out there today. Just a little bit of rain in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. Tomorrow, that potential snow in the Northeast, not a lot to talk about. Maybe a coating out there. Boston, maybe 8 p.m. Wednesday, you go a little bit to rain over to snow. But as far as snowfall goes, nothing to write home about. Less than an inch everywhere in white. Maybe in Maine or coastal Maine, you could get 2 to 4 inches. But even by Maine standards, this is not a big deal. So for many people, still going to have to wait for your first official measurable snow of the year. So forecast for today, it could be worse, but it also could be better. 23 in Minneapolis, 23 in Chicago. But the good news is, guys, and I've been talking about this for a while, it's going to warm right back up after 2 cold days. By the weekend, we could be back in the 50s and 60s in areas like Minneapolis. So wow. Just a little taste of winter. Yeah, that's it.
And then we'll say it could be worse. So there you go. All right.
That's right.
I wish we were getting some snow. I'm ready for a little.
You say that.
I know, me too.
Bill, too. I thought you were going to say, no way. I'm not bringing out that shovel. All right. Thanks, Bill. See you in a little bit. And coming up, actor Jussie Smollett on the stand to testify what he said in court in his defense yesterday and what we can expect from his questioning today.
And restriction retaliation, violent pushback to new COVID protocols, the new images of demonstrators clashing with authorities across Europe. Former star of the TV show Empire, Jussie Smollett, will be back on the witness stand today after testifying yesterday in his own defense.
Yeah, under oath, Smollett denied that the attack against him was staged in any way. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen has more.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. This morning, Jussie Smollett continues his testimony under cross-examination, with prosecutors aggressively trying to convince the jury the actor was not the victim of a hate crime at all. Nearly 3 years after Jussie Smollett first reported he was the victim of a racist and homophobic attack, the former Empire actor testifying in his own defense, charged with 6 counts of felony disorderly conduct for allegedly faking the attack and lying to police about it. Smollett telling the jury there was no hoax. Smollett seen in this police body camera video wearing the noose he told investigators the attackers put around his neck.
You want to take it off or anything?
After yelling slurs, beating him, throwing bleach on him, and saying, "This is MAGA country." The prosecution star witnesses, 2 brothers, aspiring actors, and associates of Smollett, who say he recruited them to stage the attack, paying them $3,500. Abimbola Asudario testified Smollett said he wanted me to beat him up. On the stand, Smollett insisting he paid the brothers for a diet and exercise plan, not to arrange a phony hate crime. Police using images from 4 dozen cameras to create a sequence of events, including showing the 2 brothers allegedly using $100 Smollett gave them to buy supplies for the attack. Smollett insisting he's innocent. With Smollett expected to be the final witness, the jury could get this case perhaps later today or tomorrow. He faces up to 3 years in prison if convicted. Joe, Savannah?
All right, Ron Allen, lots to watch for today. Thank you.
Major new development this morning in a case that helped spark the civil rights movement. The Department of Justice announced it has closed its investigation into the death of Emmett Till after officials failed to verify claims that the main witness recanted her statements in 2008. Till, a black teenager, was beaten and shot back in 1955 after a white woman, Carolyn Bryant Donham, said he whistled and grabbed her inside a store. Her husband at the time and another man went on trial for Till's murder, but the all-white jury found them not guilty after deliberating for just an hour. The case was reopened after a historian claimed Donham lied about Till making sexual advances toward her. The Justice Department says they will not prosecute her for perjury because the statute of limitations has passed, and also because they say they found no evidence to prove she ever recanted her statements.
Let's now take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Matt Bodner joins us from Moscow. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. We'll start this hour off in Syria, where the Syrian military is claiming that Israeli fighter jets fired missiles at targets in the port of Latakia early this morning. The strike hit a container storage facility in that port, setting some of the containers on fire. That is, of course, according to Syrian state media. Latakia is a vital port for the Syrian government. Actually, most of Syria's imports travel through it. Israel has not commented on the strike. We move along now to Myanmar, where ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi now faces 2 years in prison after the military leadership that overthrew her decided to have a 4-year sentence that was passed down yesterday. This verdict was actually the first in a total of 11 charges that she faces after she was taken into custody by the military when they overthrew her government back in February. We finish up this hour in the Middle East, where a number of countries, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, have all banned Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story due to the appearance of a trans character. Disney reportedly refused to cut scenes with the character, and some of these countries just refused to issue licenses for release. Back to you guys.
All right, Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Now, the Biden administration has announced a diplomatic boycott to the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. That means no government officials will be traveling to the games, although athletes will still be competing. The White House said the boycott is in response to human rights violations in China. Here's NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell with more.
When the Olympic flame is lit in Beijing, American athletes will be there to compete. But neither President Biden nor any other U.S. officials will be attending. The White House announcing a diplomatic boycott of the Games to protest China's human rights abuses, including crushing the democracy movement in Hong Kong, threatening Taiwan, what the U.S. calls genocide against the minority Uyghurs, and the recent disappearance of tennis star Peng Shuai after she accused a top Beijing official of sexual assault. Human rights groups wanted a total boycott, as Jimmy Carter did in 1980, when he kept athletes home from the Moscow Olympics after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Others disagree. Senator Romney, is a diplomatic boycott the way to go? Some members of both parties want a complete boycott, including the athletes.
I don't feel that the burden of our international policies should fall on the shoulders of these young people. So let's make our statement loud and clear through not sending diplomats to Beijing.
Still, Beijing's response immediate and furious, calling it an offense to China's 1.4 billion people. A spokesman saying, if the U.S. is insistent on going down the wrong path, China will take necessary and resolute countermeasures. Despite talk of a new Cold War between the U.S. and China, Washington needs China to pressure Iran against going nuclear and to work on trade and climate change. But the White House is under heavy pressure from both parties in Congress to get tougher with Beijing. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, thank you.
Continuing our coverage of the pandemic, violent clashes are erupting across Europe as thousands of people protest the latest round of COVID-19 restrictions. NBC's Matt Bradley has more.
From Belgium to Spain, protests erupted across Europe over the weekend in response to new and reimposed COVID-19 restrictions. In Brussels, the protests turned violent, with police using tear gas and water cannons on demonstrators that appeared to toss cobblestones and fireworks at them. The Capitol was filled with people protesting COVID-19 certificates needed to access bars and restaurants, and the implementation of mandatory mask wearing for most primary school children.
I am a natural being, and I want to choose over my own body and my own free will, and that's why I'm here.
Tens of thousands of protesters across the continent came out to march and demonstrate against the COVID restrictions in their countries. Last month, Austria became the first country in Western Europe to reimpose a full COVID-19 lockdown. But still, more than 40,000 people came out this weekend to protest these measures.
I'm here because I'm against forced vaccinations. I'm for human rights, and the violation of human rights should be stopped.
And in Spain, thousands of protesters took to the streets of Barcelona to protest COVID-19 certificates showing proof of vaccination, a negative test, or a COVID recovery in the last 6 months. Those are now required to enter bars, restaurants, gyms, and care homes. Europe on edge, perhaps even more so than the U.S., where only a limited number of cities have such restrictions. All this as the world looks ahead to what the Omicron variant might bring. Matt Bradley, NBC News, London.
Coming up, a new weapon in America's military arsenal.
Yeah, we got an exclusive look at the so-called killer drone and the potential danger it poses as well. That's after the break.
Superstar K-pop band BTS announced they're going to be taking a break. Note, this is not a break up, but rather a, quote, extended period of rest. Whew. The Dynamite singers made the announcement via Twitter, saying the break would give the group a chance to get re-inspired and recharged with creative energy. The statement also teased an upcoming new album and a concert in Seoul. Fans on social media overwhelmingly supportive of the upcoming hiatus. After the big announcement, each member launched their own Instagram accounts, and as of Monday evening, each member already had more than 15 million followers.
Oh, my goodness.
So, which is just slightly more than I have.
Wow,
so,
and that's kind of interesting that after that announcement, then they'd launch that. You'd think you'd want to step back.
They want some autonomy? I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like there could be more.
New album.
There.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, exactly. But good for them that they're taking a break, and good to hear that they were supportive.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Now, the U.S. military has a new weapon in its arsenal, small, lethal drones. But the technology behind them has advanced so rapidly, it's leading to some potentially dangerous consequences. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delanian has more.
Amid the quiet beauty of the Utah desert, a deadly new kind of weapon on display. NBC News got an exclusive look at a so-called killer drone. It doesn't fire a missile, it is the missile.
This is about the size of a toy drone I bought my 12-year-old a few years ago.
The Switchblade can be carried into battle in a backpack and launched miles away from a threat.
Once a target is identified, the Switchblade can find it and kill it in minutes.
Watching. AeroVironment, the drone's manufacturer, showed us how an operator
starting our turn.
Can put a Switchblade through the window of a truck. Onboard cameras capture the moment before impact.
How far away was the Switchblade when it took that picture? About 3 meters from the target.
At about $6,000 each, the Switchblade costs a fraction of the $150,000 Hellfire missiles fired from larger military drones. The Pentagon has made deadly mistakes using drones, including in August, when the U.S. military fired at what it thought was an ISIS target, but instead killed 10 civilians, including 7 children. Officials told NBC News analysts saw a child in the target area, but the missile had already been launched. The Afghan-born CEO of AeroVironment says their weapon can cancel an attack up to 2 seconds before impact.
You can make decisions while you're flying the missile in the air as to what to do during your mission.
But the development of smaller, cheaper drones, already being used on the battlefield, pose new dangers for the U.S., too. Paul Shar, a retired U.S. Army Ranger, says weapons like these change the game.
It levels the playing field between the U.S. and terrorist groups or rebel groups in a way that's certainly not good for the United States.
Iranian-backed militias have used similar drones to attack American bases in Iraq and to target the Iraqi prime minister.
The U.S. is definitely vulnerable to drone attack today. We need better defenses, and we need them urgently for U.S. troops overseas.
A new kind of weapon presenting a new kind of risk, both abroad and at home. Ken Delanian, NBC News, Dugway Proving Ground, Utah.
And coming up, fixing a cracked phone screen can be a major pain, but that could soon be changing. Why one major company says it's giving the power to repair its products back to its customers.
The impact of trigger warnings. The reason a new study says they may not be working as intended. Next. One of those moments when you wish you could just turn back time. You drop your iPhone and the screen shatters, leaving you to spend a lot of time and money to get it fixed. Well, Apple is now opening a store to sell the parts and tools for you to fix your phone yourself.
Yeah, and actually a lot of consumers are pushing for the ability to fix their own devices. This decision is bringing attention to a national movement that's already brewing. NBC News reporter Aisa Garcia-Hodges has the story.
This is probably not a decision that Apple would have made without a lot of political pressure.
When you own a car or a house and something breaks, you can fix it. That's not often the case with your electronics. But that could be changing.
We should be able to make the things that we have last.
Kyle Wiens is the CEO of iFixit, a how-to website and retailer. He wants customers to be able to repair their devices and for manufacturers to give better access to spare parts and repair tools.
Let's take the battery in your car. We all know every few years you need to change the battery in your car, right? We're probably not going to throw away your car because it needs a new battery. But this happens with phones. And so we've been sort of convinced to upgrade our products more frequently than we need to.
Apple recently announced it will be opening an online store where consumers will be able to buy parts, tools, and manuals to fix their devices themselves.
This is huge. This is, I think, particularly the iPhone is the, I think, most profitable product in the history of the world. And so the manufacturer of that product to come along and say, actually, yeah, we're motivated to help our customers make it last longer. That's a really big deal.
The store will open in 2022 and offer more than 200 parts and tools needed to repair common problems like damaged displays or dead batteries. It will eventually expand its product offerings, but will initially only carry parts for iPhone 12 and 13.
It's a device that they have a long history with. They know what people are looking for in terms of repairability.
Neil Seibart, founder of Above Avalon, said he doesn't expect tons of people to try to make their own repairs, but he and others are optimistic that this first from a mobile manufacturer will lead to device longevity and help set a precedent that others will follow. Apple's chief operating officer, Jeff Williams, said in a statement, "Creating greater access to Apple genuine parts gives our customers even more choice if a repair is needed."
They kind of created this world where our products stop working after a couple of years. So I'm optimistic that Apple can maybe help lead the way back out of that wilderness.
Can you walk me through some of the political changes happening around right to repair? You know, Apple makes this decision to make it easier for people to repair their devices, but they're not doing that in a vacuum.
So far this year, you had 27 different states introduce right to repair legislation. You had the Federal Trade Commission issue a landmark report saying, they examined the market and they said there's no justification for manufacturers' obstacles to repair. The Biden administration issued an executive order in support of this.
We've been banging this drum and shoving our feet in any door that will open since about 2010. So we're finally at the point where we're very confident that we've gotten the mind share in a number of states.
Gay Gordon Byrne, executive director of the Repair Association, says iPhones are an easy example, but repair issues pertain to anything with a chip, like TVs and home appliances. She said the movement is putting pressure on additional manufacturers to make repair parts available. It's gaining bipartisan support, but there's one ultimate goal.
What's the end game for the right to repair movement?
Oh, passing laws. I'm sorry, but that really is the end game, to make sure that repair is as easy as buying.
All right, interesting stuff there. I don't know that I'd be good at fixing it.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the processes
good fine motor skills, but
yeah, exactly.
Not my specialty.
All right, thank you, Aisa, for that report. That's super interesting.
And time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs is with us today. Hi, Bertha. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. Tesla is replacing repeater cameras in some Model S, X, and 3 vehicles, according to documents seen by CNBC. These are vehicles that have been made in the U.S. and apparently have faulty circuit boards inside. Now, I know you're saying, what's a repeater camera? Well, there are these cameras that enable driver assistance features like autopilot, and they also give a driver a sense of all of the vehicles and what's happening around their car. are in blind spots. Tesla has yet to actually initiate a recall for those repeater cameras. Meantime, Toyota has announced that it will build a $1.3 billion battery plant for electric vehicles in North Carolina. Company expects the facility to be able to produce enough lithium-ion batteries for 200,000 all-electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles annually, when production is scheduled to begin in 2025. The plant near Greensboro in central North Carolina is expected to create 1,750 jobs. And Patek Philippe announced that it is making 170 special versions of its most popular watch as part of a partnership with Tiffany & Company. Special watch, known as the Nautilus Ref 5711, was discontinued less than a year ago because the attention and demand for the watch had gone so far, or too far rather. So it's going to feature a Tiffany blue face that will be sold at select Tiffany boutiques and is expected to cost around $52K. That's $52,000. So, Joe, you know, if you're thinking about a gift, all of a sudden that Apple Watch or the Garmin watch sounds pretty cheap, doesn't it?
No kidding. Now I know what I'm getting everyone for,
Oh,
for
yeah,
the holidays.
definitely. Interesting that
Right?
they stopped making it because there was so much demand.
Yeah.
I guess that's why you keep a price like that. Is
There you go.
exclusive. All right. Thanks, Bertha.
Yeah.
Time now for our weekly check-in, where we take a look at some of the biggest mental health headlines and how they may be impacting your life.
That's right. Dr. Erica Richards joins us now to give us some tips on how to keep our mental health in tip-top shape. Dr. Richards is the chair of psychiatry at Sibley Memorial Hospital and assistant professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins Medicine. Dr. Richards, good morning. Thanks for joining us for this. So let's start with something new we're hearing about trigger warnings. So that's those things you see on social media or even right here on the news on our show when we warn people what they're about to see could potentially be upsetting or disturbing. But new research is actually suggesting those warnings might not be working as intended. So tell us, what does this research tell us? Are trigger warnings important? And how can we engage with them to be more effective and protective of our mental health?
Good morning, Savannah. So before we talk about trigger warnings, let's talk about PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. That's who they're targeting. So PTSD, of course, is when someone is triggered by a traumatic event, typically defined as feeling like they're in a life-threatening situation or the perception that their life is in danger. Symptoms can include flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, mood symptoms. And so trigger warnings were designed with this population in mind. They're the warnings that appear before someone may be exposed to something that could worsen anxiety or kind of make them relive that trauma again.
So we often... Oh, go ahead.
It's important to note that not everyone that has, trauma is going to experience post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. And so we really want to target the trigger warnings to that population.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So another topic, we often report on the mental health of children, especially on their social connections during the pandemic. A new study showed that FOMO, or fear of missing out, was a major reason why kids are using their phones to stay connected to their friends. That makes sense. But walk us through this concept. What role does FOMO play in connecting with other kids? And could this lead them to spend too much time on the phone or on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, great question. And so this fear of missing out, how do we distinguish that? How do we attack it? So with the start of the pandemic, we saw an increase in the use of technology. Parents were buying, an increasing amount of access to tablets, online games, movies, other activities to keep children busy and to keep them engaged because they couldn't go outside and do the things they usually wanted to do. But this leads now to an increased concern that maybe there's a paradoxical effect. Instead of making especially teenagers feel more connected, that they might develop this fear of missing out and be ultimately more disconnected from their peers. So the research, this is out of the University of British Columbia, shows that the teenagers are actually saying, no, our online presence is helping us. But if we were to talk about FOMO, what we'll be talking about are these risk factors that there's a smaller population that feels more disconnected. And that's who we want to give, really some advice to about what to do. And I think there's really three things to consider. One, if you're feeling that way, decrease time on social media. Two, you can kind of increase the time outside or in smaller group activities. And for parents, they really need to be engaged and ask their kids what they're doing online and how is it making them feel.
Absolutely. All great advice, great tips there. Now let's end on some news that has to do with Britney Spears. So we're continuing, of course, to learn more about what the pop star's life was like under that 13-year conservatorship and what her mental health was like. She's now saying it included forced therapy for hours every week. Here's some of her interpretation of those sessions. Let's listen.
I think we need to figure some things out. Are you breathing well? Are you eating well? Are you okay daily? And what time do you go to sleep at night? Because I'm here to help you, okay? That's key number one. I'm here to help you.
So how can something like forced therapy sessions, like what she described there, do more harm than good? And is there any hope to find a therapist that can help get over that trauma?
There is hope. So, of course, none of us were kind of in the room to know all of the details related with Britney Spears. But if we take it back for a second, let's talk about kind of a philosophy about therapy and who that's helpful for. And what we can say is not everyone has to have a mental health diagnosis to benefit from therapy. So it's important to understand that. The second is that with therapy, there has to be that therapeutic relationship, that interaction between therapist and patient or client. And so we want people to focus on that. We want people to understand that there are options available.
Wonderful. Dr. Erica Richards, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, the emotional return for a dance troupe devastated by that deadly parade crash in Wisconsin.
Yeah, what they told us about dancing again and the friends that they're honoring. That's up next.
Now for a story of remarkable resilience. The dancing Grannies making an emotional return, marching in a Christmas parade just 2 weeks after enduring an unspeakable tragedy.
Yeah, that's right. The troupe is making good on their promise to keep on dancing. NBC News' Tom Yamas has the latest.
For decades, the Milwaukee Dancing Grannies have made fans all across Wisconsin smile. But just 2 weeks ago, the dance troupe made headlines all over the country in a way no one could have imagined.
We are all Waukesha.
It just swerved in the other direction and just hit as many people as it could.
I sat down with some of the members after that tragic day in Waukesha. 3 of their members killed in the parade rampage, along with the husband of another member. Their emotions were raw, but their determination to carry on the legacies of those they lost was unmistakable.
I think what I would like is for everyone to remember how much joy they brought to everyone, how much they taught us, how much they taught us to enjoy dancing and being together and being a family. I know we're going to continue going on. It might take us a year to pull back and get some more people to join, but I know in our hearts we're going to continue.
And continue they did. The Dancing Grannies making their first appearance since that tragedy, this time at the Franklin, Wisconsin Christmas Parade, the city's first ever.
It was the starting of healing.
The women and their families walking arm in arm, sporting custom-made blue sweatshirts. On the back of each one, in loving memory of Ginny, Lee, Tamara, and Bill, and the marching orders, keep on dancing.
I think they would be pretty proud of us to be doing this. Ginny and Lee were the glue that kept us together. We're trying to honor them and keep the Grannies going for the future.
The grandmas carrying a banner like they did in Waukesha, but added to this one a broken heart, a symbol of their loss, and a reminder of why they dance.
They'll always be with us. And I really think the banner needs to also be in the parade. We're doing this for them because that is what they would want. They would be angry if we just didn't do anything anymore.
Some members still recovering from physical injuries, unable to march, all of them still reeling from the trauma and grief of that day. But even in the face of profound and personal loss, the Grannies, with their bravery and resilience, bringing smiles to the faces of all in attendance.
I think that strength just means that they just feel like walking in honor is exactly what those people would want them to do, is not stop.
It brings joy that we are bringing so much joy to people. I didn't realize that. Seeing the people clapping and the signs brought tears to my eyes. It was to me like a Granny parade for us.
Beautiful story. Tom, thanks so much for that report. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.